I think we can start. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so at the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to the Honorable President, Professor Dhruv Mukhopadhyay, and other council members of our structural geology and tectonic studies and community for gracing this online platform. Now, with the permission of the chair and as your host for today's evening, I would like to welcome Dr. Attreyee Ghosh to deliver the monthly lecture of this month, organized under the aegis of Structural Geology and Tectonic Studies Group in association with Department of Geology, Banaras Hindu University. Welcome, Dr. Ghosh. And before I hand over the stage to Dr. Ghosh, I would like to provide a brief introduction about today's speaker, mainly for young students and other listeners across India who have joined through our YouTube channel as well. Dr. Ghosh earned her master's from IIT Bombay, and subsequently she did her MA from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University and completed her PhD in geophysics from Stony Brook University. She also worked as a postdoctoral research associate in University of Southern California and Stony Brook University from 2008 to 2012 before joining IISc Bangalore in 2012. Dr. Ghosh is a prolific earth scientist and has published more than 25 research articles in journals of international repute and several papers in different international symposiums and workshops. She has already guided and also guiding several PhD students to their PhD. She has also handled several research projects funded from ISRO, Scientific and Engineering Research Board, Department of Science and Technology, and Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India. Presently, Dr. Ghosh is an associate professor in the department in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and she has also the associate editor of journals like Geochemistry, Geophysics, and Geosystems, popularly known as G3, and Frontiers in Earth Science. Apart from this, she is also a regular reviewer for journals like Nature, Journal of Geophysical Research, EPSL, and many more. So now, with the permission of the chair, I would like to request Dr. Ghosh to present her talk on the Earth's plate tectonic history and mantle convection. Welcome, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Banerjee. Let me just get started. Okay, so thank you everybody for being here today. So today I'll be talking about Earth plate tectonic history and mantle convection. Now, we now know that plate tectonics is a surface expression of convection going on inside the Earth's mantle. So here is just a cartoon of a subducting slab sinking inside the mantle, and a buoyant warm mantled plume coming up from the core mantle boundary. And most of the surface expressions, be it plate velocities, be it some topography, stress, strain, all of these can be linked to the processes, more precisely to the process of mantle convection that is going on inside the Earth. Now, so we have a very thorough picture about the inside of the Earth, Curtsy seismic tomography. So seismic tomography gives a 3D image of the Earth's interior. So if you can think of it as a little bit like a CT scan that people get done, in a hospital. So there you have X-rays shooting at you from different angles, and those images are combined to give a three-dimensional image of any structure of your body, whether it's a brain or any other organ of the body. And something similar happens in seismic tomography. So whenever you have an earthquake, you can see my the arrow here. So whenever you have an earthquake, it sends out seismic waves and these seismic waves get reflected and refracted at various boundaries. And they finally get recorded at seismometers that are situated on different places on the surface of the Earth. Now, as these seismic waves travel through the Earth's interior, they contain information about the Earth's interior. So this is a typical seismogram where we are looking at the P wave, the arrival of the P waves and the S waves and the surface waves. And these seismic waves travel with different velocities inside the surface of the Earth, depending through which layer they are passing through. So different material inside the Earth will either speed up or slow down these seismic waves. And by noting these speeding up and slowing down of the seismic waves, we can form an idea about what the velocity structure of the Earth's interior look like. And this is a typical seismic tomography model. There are many such models. This is just one example. And here what I'm showing you are depth slices of seismic tomography at starting from Moho, which is about 40 kilometers, all the way up to the core mantle boundary, 2,890 kilometers. And these red and blue colors give you the seismic wave velocities. So wherever you see blue, it means that the seismic waves are traveling faster in that area. And wherever you have red, it means that the seismic waves are traveling slower in that area. So we can have an idea about the velocity of these seismic waves at different depths based on the seismic tomography. And similarly, we can look at a cross section instead of these depth slices. So here we are looking at a cross section across the North Atlantic, and these are different seismic tomography models: Detox P01, PR1, P05, etc. These are some recent seismic tomography models, and you can see that there are small differences between them, but more or less they are telling you the structure of the mantle beneath this area. So basically we are in the North Atlantic, where you have the Icelandic plume. So it is imaging these low velocity of the plume. So all of these seismic tomography models are able to image that plume. So, by looking at these seismic tomography images, we can get a three-dimensional view of the interior of the Earth. Now, how do we go from velocity to density? So what's driving mantle convection? So mantle convection is driven by density differences within the mantle. And what seismic tomography is giving you are the velocity differences, right? So all we are looking at in the previous figure or in this figure, these are the velocity anomalies, how the velocities are changing. So how do we transfer these information of velocity to density? And for that, we have people, based on mineral physics experiments in the laboratories, people use a velocity to density scaling, and it is given by this relationship, where you have where rho is the density and v is the seismic wave velocity. Now there is uncertainty about what that scaling should be. And I'm just giving you a few examples about what people think the scaling should be. There, for example, here they have used a very simple scaling. So we are looking at the depth from 0 to the core mantle boundary on the y-axis, and the x-axis is these R, the scaling. And this model has used a very simple two-layer scaling, where you have a slightly smaller scaling in the lithosphere and slightly higher scaling in the below that. On the other hand, you can see this model which has used this study, which has used a much more complicated scaling. So there are some, there is argument or disagreement about what that scaling would be. But the good news is, I would say that they kind of converge. Whatever the scaling may be, the results do not differ drastically. Okay, So we can kind of safely choose a realistic scaling, and we can go from these velocities to densities, and that drives convection within the mantle. Okay, so as I said, mantle convection, we think that the plates are just the upper thermal boundary layer of the mantle. So whatever is happening on the surface are directly linked to the processes that are going on inside the mantle. And when we think of mantle convection, it is very similar to what we think when we talk about convection. So if you have hot water boiling in a pot, if you have water boiling in a pot which is heated from below, so the hot water will be light and it will rise up, and the cold water from the top, which is dense, will sink. And that's exactly the process that is going on inside the mantle. So you have hot material that is heated because of the hot core that will rise up, and you have the cold material like the subducting slabs that will sink. And that's what's driving convection within the Earth's mantle. Now, if anybody has any question, please feel free to stop me and ask, okay? So, all right. So we talked about convection, the Earth's interior in the present day, that is given by seismic tomography. And that can tell us what is hot and what is cold, and so what is rising and what is sinking. Now, if you want to know about the Earth in the past, now we do not have seismic tomography in the past, right? So the seismic tomography is just the present day Earth structure of the mantle. So in order to know what is going on in the past, what do we do? Okay, so for that, we take the help of plate reconstruction. So I'm just going to move over to, see, okay. So I have example of a plate reconstruction, and there you can see it starts from the present day, and it goes all the way back to 500 million years. Okay, so here is the present day surface of the Earth. That's what the plates look like today, and I'll come to in a minute what these blue lines are. But let me start this animation. And so this changes every 10 million years into the past. And you can see that the continents are coming together. And at about 120 million years, they all formed one single supercontinent. And you can see the, how the shapes of the continents change. So we again have a separation between the northern and the southern continents. So we are at 420. And then finally, at 500 million years, this is what the Earth looked like. Okay, so from the present day till 500 million years in the past, we have been able to reconstruct what the surface of the Earth looked like. Now, so the question is, how do people do that? How do we know that what the Earth looked like so far back in time? And for that, let's go back to this figure. So you see these blue lines on this figure. So these are what are known as magnetic anomalies. So most of these plate reconstruction are done based on marine magnetic anomalies. So magnetic anomalies are basically your positive and negative polarity rocks, bands of rocks that are found on the ocean floor, especially on two sides of the mid-oceanic ridge. So we know that the Earth has changed its polarity several times in its history. So what is magnetic north today was magnetic south at some point of time back. And this polarity reversals have happened quite a few times throughout the Earth's history. And when you have lava that is coming up along the mid-oceanic ridges, these lavas have magnetic minerals like magnetite, and they get aligned according to the Earth's they get aligned towards the Earth's magnetic north, whatever that magnetic north is at that time. So right now, the lava that is coming up is getting aligned to the according to the present Earth's magnetic pole. And when the magnetic field was reversed, whatever rock that was solidifying, there the polarity would have been completely opposite. And we find these oppositely polarized rocks on two sides of the mid-oceanic ridge in all the oceans of the Earth. Okay, so for example, these colors are giving you the magnetic intensity, and this red and the blue is also telling you what is normal polarity and what is reverse polarity. So this is some examples of magnetic polarity in the Atlantic, in the North and the South Atlantic. Now we can also precisely date these magnetic anomalies. So we can tell at what time the polarity reversal has happened. Okay, so we also have a map of the seafloor age. So how old is the oceanic crust at that point of time? So this is the present day seafloor age, and you can see that the seafloor is youngest along the mid-oceanic ridges, and as they move away from the ridge, they get older and older. So combining these seafloor edges and these magnetic anomalies, we can reconstruct what the position of the plates had been in the past. So most of these plate reconstructions are done by looking at these marine magnetic anomalies and the ages of the ocean floor at that time. And with more and more data coming out, we are able to go more and more back, back in time. And based on these past plate reconstruction, now we are able to address many of the problems that we could not think of addressing before. And I'm going to give you some examples of some very recent studies that have come out, and all of these are based on these past plate reconstruction. So, for example, there is a study that was talking about the reconstruction of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so this is you have figures that goes from 140 million years, 100 million years, 50 million years, and the present day. So we know that this is what the Pacific Ocean looks like now, but Pacific actually started as a very small plate, which was surrounded by these three plates, which are no longer on the surface of the Earth: the Zanagi, the Farallon, and the Phoenix. So all of these plates have now subducted inside the Earth's mantle, and they are no longer there. And this is how the evolution of the Pacific plate has taken place. So from a very small plate surrounded by three other plates, the Pacific has now grown to be the largest plate on Earth. So that's one example, the reconstruction of Pacific Ocean based on these plate reconstruction. There's a recent paper, and this came out only this month in August in Nature, and there they were looking at the concentration of oxygen in the oceans. So the plate reconstruction, the application is not only confined to geophysics, they are also very much applied to in the geochemistry community as well. So for example, in geochemistry, people can reconstruct the concentration of the oxygens, mainly based on these benthic foraminifera. And in this study, what they have shown is how the oxygen concentration in the oceans is going to vary because of the supercontinent cycle. So here is the present day. So the white areas are the continents, the land masses, and the colors is telling you the concentration of the oxygen. So as the configuration of the continents changed with time, so from the present day up to 540 million years back in time, they are showing how the ocean, the concentration of oxygen in the ocean is going to be affected. Okay. Another, okay. So another very recent study that came out in Nature Geoscience again this year, and this talks about the abrupt change in the Pacific plate motion. So if we look at the Pacific plate, we see this seamount chain. We call it the Hawaii Emperor seamount chain. Okay, so this is a line of volcanic islands that are situated on the surface of the Pacific Ocean floor. And we have these seamounts everywhere else on Earth, but what's interesting about these chain is this bend in this line of volcanic islands. So this is Hawaii, and this is still an active volcano. So this is the youngest age. And if you trace the ages of these seamounts, it goes progressively older. So this is the youngest, and this is the oldest. So we know that these hotspot chain occurs because the plate moving over the surface of a fixed hotspot. So what's mysterious here is that why is there such an abrupt bend in this Hawaiian Emperor seamount chain? And there has been lots of studies trying to explain this bend. And this study recently claimed, again based on this plate reconstruction, is that they tried to explain this bend in this chain, the seamount chain, on the Pacific plate motion, as well as the motion of the mantle plume. And again, another paper, again from this year, and here they were looking at the Earth's tectonic carbon. And what, again, this is in the realm of geochemistry, where people are interested in how much carbon has gone inside the Earth, the influx of carbon inside the Earth, and the outflux from due to volcanism. And because that would affect the climate a lot. So especially people who are reconstructing paleoclimate, for them this knowledge about how much CO2 goes inside and how much CO2 comes out is very important. Here again, this paper has used plate reconstructions in order to estimate how much carbon has been gone inside the Earth's mantle and how much has been outfluxed. And this is done because, as you know, as the plate configuration is changing, so the configuration of the subduction zone and the mid-oceanic ridges are also changing. And the subduction zones are the areas where the carbon is sinking inside the mantle, and the mid-oceanic ridges are the areas where the carbon is coming out of the mantle. Okay, so again, this plate reconstruction again having a important effect on the field of say paleoclimate reconstruction. Okay, so now coming back, so this is kind of just an introduction of what plate reconstruction is and how different studies have used these plate reconstructions to address some very important problems in earth sciences. So I'm going to come to the second part of the talk, where I'm going to talk about two problems that my group has addressed and still addressing. And first is the evolution of the Indian Ocean geoid law, and the second is the thickness of the Indian lithosphere. Okay, now just to give an introduction of what what is the Indian Ocean geoid low. So this is the lowest geoid anomaly that is present in the northern Indian Ocean, and that sits at the tip of the Indian Peninsula. And there has been a lot of controversy about what creates this anomaly. So this is goes down to about 100 meters. So if there is a ship that is sailing on the surface of the ocean, it's going to dip down 100 meters and come up. Okay. So there is kind of a hole on the floor of the ocean. Okay, that's what a geoid low is. And again, it's controversial how it originated. So again, and just taking a step back, so what is the geoid anomaly? So the Earth has different surfaces. So in green is the topographic surface, and in red is what we call the reference ellipsoid surface. So reference ellipsoid is basically the mathematical shape the Earth would have taken if it were constituted if it were made up of uniform density. If there were no density variations within the Earth, right? That would have been a perfect oblate spheroid. But the Earth is not a perfectly, is not a perfect ellipsoid, and there are deviations from this ellipsoid, this theoretical ellipsoid surface. And these deviations are known as the geoid. These deviations from the reference ellipsoid are called the geoid anomalies. And the geoid is an equipotential surface and that coincides with the Earth's seafloor. Okay, so it's an equipotential surface. So work done on the surface going from one part of the surface to the other is 0, and it coincides with the Earth's sea level. And the deviation of this geoid surface from the reference ellipsoid causes these geoid anomalies. And so what gives rise to the geoid surface? The origin of the geoid surface is because the fact that the Earth's interior is not of uniform density. It is very much heterogeneous. So wherever you have a high density or a mass excess, you would get a geoid high or a positive geoid anomaly, where your geoid surface will overshoot the reference ellipsoid. And wherever you have a mass deficit, for example, a low density material, that will lower your geoid surface. And that will, so you will have a negative geoid anomaly or a geoid low. And this geoid is an important indicator of the dynamics of the deep mantle, because looking at the geoid highs and lows will give us some idea about the mass distribution within the Earth's mantle. Okay, so we published a paper in 2017 where we looked at the present day origin of the Indian Ocean geoid low, and we kind of showed that, so this is the geoid low that we had modeled from based on a numerical models. And if you look at some of these vertical profiles underneath this geoid low, and this is what we see. So these cross sections are showing you temperatures, okay, non-dimensional temperatures that goes from 0 to 1. And these blue is showing you areas that are colder, and red means areas that are hotter. Now, beneath this geoid low, we see that there is some sort of a high temperature or hot material within the mid-mantle depths. Okay, and so what we concluded in this paper is that there is a geoid low because of this hot material. Now, if you have a hot material, it has low density, and that is going to cause a mass deficit, and that will give rise to a negative geoid anomaly or a geoid low. And in that paper, we also speculated that this high temperature material, this hot material, comes from the African LLSVP. So this is the African large low shear velocity province, or sometimes it is also commonly known as the African super plume. So what we kind of speculated in that paper is that, again, if you look at the cross section here, so this is the African LLSVP. So you see some sort of a hot material that is coming up from the edge of the LLSVP, and it is kind of bending eastward, and this is pooling underneath the Indian Ocean geoid low. And so what we kind of argued is that there is a plume that is coming from the edge of the African LLSVP, and as the Indian plate moved towards the northeast, this plume got stretched. And this plume material is now pooled underneath this region, underneath the Indian Ocean, and that is what's giving rise to the geoid low there. Okay, so, but again, that the modeling that we did in this paper was a instantaneous modeling, or in other words, by looking like we are trying to find out at present day what is the cause of the geoid low. But in order to prove these fact that whether this is really a cause of a plume that is arising from the African LLSVP, we needed to go back in time and see whether that is actually what had happened. Okay, so again, as I said that when we are going back in time, we do not have any information about the Earth's mantle. All we have is information of the Earth's surface. How the plates look like this is a plate reconstruction 140 million years ago. And the plate reconstruction also gives us the velocities of the floor. We can capture up the ocean floor by using this half-space cooling model. So this is the temperature, and this is what we call the error function, and Z is the depth, and this is the diffusivity, kappa, and T is the age of the ocean floor. So if we have an idea about what the age of the ocean floor was at that specific point of time, we can calculate what would be the temperature. So we can reconstruct not only the plate velocities and the positions of the plates, we can also reconstruct the surface temperature at that point of time. And this is what we had done. We have calculated the temperature of the ocean floor at 140 million years ago. And so in order to drive convection within the mantle, as I said, for convection, you need to have hot material coming up and cold material sinking down. Now, so far back in time, we do not have any information about the Earth's, the mantle interior. So all we have is the surface information. But once we initiate this model, so you have on the surface, you have hot material and cold material. And this hot and cold material, with time, the cold material is going to sink inside the mantle, and that is going to churn the mantle and initiate mantle convection. Okay, so that way we can drive mantle convection by imposing these temperature anomalies on the surface, as well as the reconstructed plate velocities. So we use a community convection model called convection code called SITCOM-S. That was and this is a finite element numerical model. And what we input inside the model is these velocities on the surface of the mantle and the temperatures. Okay, and then we let the model run forward in time, starting from 140 million years. And okay, so again, I will go back to one of the animations. Okay, so this is done, this work is mostly done by my current PhD student, Devanjan Pal. So I will start this model. So this is at present day. And so this is what we are looking is the geoid surface of the Earth, and it goes from plus minus 80. And so this is the red color is giving you the geoid high, and the blue color is giving you the geoid low. So here you have the Indian Ocean geoid low. And these are a few cross sections, vertical profiles that we have taken underneath this geoid low. So the model starts at 140 million years, and this will run forward in time. So let's see how this looks like. And again, these temperatures in the cross sections are giving you the temperatures. These colors in the cross sections are giving you temperatures. So blue would be cold, and red would be warm. Okay, so it has been cold material that is sinking inside the mantle, and hot material that is rising up. Okay, so let's start the animations from 140 million years. And so you can see the mantle was uniform in the beginning, and with time you have these temperature anomalies on the surface that goes inside the mantle, churn the mantle, and this is what the present state of the mantle is. So I'll just run it once more. So in the beginning, at 140 million years, you see that the mantle is uniform. Okay, all we have is an LLSVP. As a compositional boundary at the core mantle boundary, and then you have temperature variations at the surface. The rest of the mantle is uniform. And this is what the plate configuration looked like at 140 million years ago. There was no Indian Ocean geoid low. And as we start the model, we see that these temperature anomalies start entering the mantle, and in the process, churning the mantle. So you have the cold slabs sinking inside the mantle, and the hot material that is coming up in the form of plumes. And again, we see here is that if you look at these cross sections, so you have these plumes that are coming up from the core mantle, from the surface of the hot plumes that are coming up from the surface of the core, from the surface of the core. And just going back to the presentation. Okay, so this is the observed geoid on the surface of the Earth. Okay, so this is something that we have measured, that we have observed, and this is the geoid that we have modeled from our from a convection model. Okay, so we see that. So here is the observed Indian Ocean geoid low, and this is what we get from our models. And it is you can see that we can reproduce this geoid low pretty well from these time-dependent models. And this is these are the snapshots at two different cross sections underneath the geoid low. And again, what is prominent are these plumes that are rising from these core mantle boundaries. And this is just a three-dimensional, look of the same thing. So just give me a minute. I'm just going to close the window. It's too much noise. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what this figure shows is on the surface we have it's showing the geoid anomaly. So again, it goes from minus 90 to plus 90, and in the cross section you have the temperature anomalies. So here is the Indian Ocean geoid low. So we can see a plume that is coming up towards the south of it, and then you also have the subducting slabs. So the question is, what is causing this low? Is this because you have the plumes, you also have the slabs? So which one is more responsible for making this geoid low? So so what I had shown you in this slide is the results from our best model. We ran a series of models, and here are two examples from two of them. And you can see that in these models, so on the left-hand side, model, you have subducting slabs sinking inside the mantle, but you do not have any plumes, okay? And you do not also get the geoid low. You do get a negative anomaly in the Indian Ocean, but it does not match what the circular Indian Ocean geoid low feature. Another model, and there again, you have subducting slabs sinking inside the mantle, but you do not have a plume. And in this case also, you do not get the geoid low. So again, this is kind of reinforcing that what we had claimed in our previous study, but this time with time-dependent modeling, starting from the past up to the present, that these plumes that are arising from the African LLSVP are mostly responsible for causing these anomalous feature in the Indian Ocean. Okay, and then the second problem I would talk about is about the interaction of the Indian plate with the reunion plume. And this study was published in Geology earlier this year. Now, we know that the Indian plate had moved from the south and to northwards and had collided with the Eurasian plate. So this is the present position of India, and then these were the positions of India back in time at 65 million years, 90 million years, 120 million years, and so on. Now, on its journey from the southern hemisphere to the north, the plate had encountered many plume eruptions. Okay, so these are there was Marian plume, there was a Kerguelen plume, and 65 million years ago there was the Reunion plume that erupted underneath the southern part of India. Now, there is also kind of a controversy regarding the thickness of the Indian lithosphere. So cratons are supposed to be very thick, right? It's from 200 to 300 kilometers, and that's what we see in all the cratons of the Earth. But when it comes to the Indian craton, there are studies that say that they are as thick as the other cratons of the world, but there are also many studies that say that the Indian craton is much thinner than the other cratons that we have on other continents. So it's not that their thickness is its thickness is not more than 100 kilometers. So so this was the question was raised in an earlier paper and by Kumar et al. And there they asked the question: could it be possible that the eruption of the Reunion plume underneath India had kind of scraped away, had removed the root of this Indian of the craton underneath the underneath southern India? And this is something that we wanted to investigate using these time-dependent mantle convection models. So again, we run our models. We reconstructed what the position of India was at 65 million years. And we also reconstructed the Reunion plume at that time. And we also had the plate velocities at different ages. And again, we let the model run forward in time from 65 till the present day. And this is some of the results from that study. So this is the Indian craton in blue and the Reunion plume in red at 65 million years ago. And these are the different time steps at 48 million years, at 28 million years, and this is close to the present day at 4 million years ago. And the main thing that we found from this study is that so here was the original thickness of the Indian craton at 65 million years. And here you have the plume that is interacting with the craton. And so these colors again is giving you the temperature. Okay, no, not the temperature, sorry, it's the viscosity. So viscosity can be defined as a resistance to flow. So viscosity can also be defined as the strength of the material, the rheology of the material. So blue would mean something that is strong, that has a high viscosity, and red would mean that something that is weak, which has a lower viscosity. Okay. So cold material usually have a high viscosity, and warm material usually have a low viscosity. So here we see, as we let a model run forward in time, what happens. So from an original, so we initially kept the craton thickness at 300 kilometers from the surface. And with time, we see that the viscosity of the craton decreasing. So in other words, the craton is getting shorter and shorter, shallower and shallower. So this is at 48 million years time step, this is at 28 million years time step, and this is at 4 million years time step. So from an original depth of 300 kilometer, the craton is barely a little more than say 130 or 140 kilometers. Okay, and again we performed a series of models, and for the most extreme model, we found that the craton had lost about 130 kilometer of its root, which is about 43%. So with the interaction of the reunion plume, the thickness of the craton had been reduced by 43%. So did it really happen? We don't know, but all this modeling is telling us that it is possible to have a plume erode the base of the craton. And we need more studies, more seismic studies to kind of have the last word as to what the thickness, or the actual thickness of the Indian lithosphere is. Is it really thin, or is it as thick as the cratons elsewhere on Earth? Okay, so this is my last slide. I think it was too long a talk. So this is my conclusion slide. So advances in plate reconstruction can address problems that we could not think of addressing before, because now that we know what the Earth looked like millions of years ago, we can address many of these problems that we couldn't have thought of addressing before. And what we have found is that the evolution of the Indian Ocean geoid law, we have addressed the problem of the evolution of the Indian Ocean geoid law, and we have found that the plumes arising from the edge of the African LLSBP or the African super plume is responsible for this negative geoid anomaly in the Indian Ocean. And in a separate study, we also showed that if the Indian plate is indeed has a low thickness, then the low thickness could have arisen because of the interaction of the reunion plume with the thick Indian lithosphere. So that's all that I have for today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. The session is now open for discussion and questions.
May I start?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Please, yeah.
Thank you very much for the excellent talk that you have given. It's really a wonderful one. The thing is, when I like the talk that you mentioned here, and I think it will be very good for young people out here to at least know how things are done. Basically, when we in the first part of your talk, it was basically meant for students. I think that is very good for structural geology and geodynamic people, students present here. So I didn't understand what
So-
are the subduction system that you talked about.
So the subduction at that area is because of the Stathian slabs. So the
Okay.
Stathian slab that was subducting inside the mantle.
Mhm.
So that was what we were.
You're talking about.
Yes.
Are you in a line to say that this plume, I mean this push from this, this African plume, is in a way is a driving mechanism for to drive the Indian plate towards north?
It could be possible. This is also one of the things that we are investigating. Whether, because it is one of the things that we speculated in the geology paper also, was that if the root of the craton was removed by the interaction of the reunion plume, so it's kind of, the plate shedding its weight. So as a result, it could have moved much faster. So that could be one of the reasons that the plate had moved very fast. So we do not have enough evidence to say that, to back that up, but it could have happened. Yes, the plume could have, helped in pushing the plate northwards.
Okay.
At a faster
Thank you. Thank you. I have several questions and queries in my mind, but
the velocity of the velocity of seismic waves, that is true. But, we know that the entire Earth is not anisotropic. We know certain parts are anisotropic. Okay. So, and this velocity to density is kind of it's a first order transformation. Yes, there can be many second order variations within that. Okay. But at least we know that something that is that has a high temperature will have a low velocity, and something that is cold that has a low temperature will have high velocity. Now, how high and how low, those values can change depending on whether you're talking about an isotropy or whether you have any other phenomenon. So that is why I said that there is an uncertainty in the scaling when you go from velocity to density. We know that this is cold will be fast and hot will be slow, but yes, the exact values, there are definitely uncertainties. Okay? And but at the end of the day, as I was saying, that though these the values can be uncertain, but they do not drastically change the output of the model results.
I hope, Arindam, if you are there, are you satisfied with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Please, Pushpendra, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So you have shown that the hot material is coming from African plume beneath the Indian Ocean. So what is the driving force behind this mechanism?
So
how it
the
comes
driving
from?
force,
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
So how it comes from this African part to beneath the Indian Oceans? That means there must be bending of mantle, right?
Yes. So what we think the driving force is the motion of the Indian plate. Since the Indian plate was moving so fast.
In that case, you see the northward travel of Indian plate is not, in fact, that caused this plume material to take along with it, right? Not that this plume is pulling the Indian plate towards north.
Yes, we don't. It's a chicken and egg problem. We don't know which is, what is the cause and what is the, the result, the outcome. So, but the bending of the plume could have happened because of the this fast velocity of the Indian plate. So that's
but mantle plume has been originated due to the motion of Indian plate, right?
no.
No.
The mantle plume has originated not because of the mantle plume is because of as the slabs are coming down and hitting the LLSBP, African LLSBP. So you have this cold material that all of a sudden sinks down and encounters the hot LLSBP. And these instabilities create these thermal instabilities, and those give rise to mantle plumes. The creation of the mantle plumes are not because of the motion of the inlet. The creation of the mantle plume is because of the cool slabs that are sinking inside the earth and that's encountering the LLS. But the shape of the plume, the bending of the plume, that would have happened because of the motion of the earth. Does that make sense?
I have a minor question here. I mean, say, for example, if you bend the plume over, say, several hundred kilometers, would it not disturb the convection cells as well? And does the model take that into account?
I mean, plumes are part of the convection cells, right? I mean, these are the upwelling arms of the convection cells. So this is a self-consistent system. So it's not that we are imposing anything, we are trying to bend the plume by any means, okay? So what I showed you, this is an observation, right? That the convection cells seems to show that the plume is bent.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. When you talk about the Pacific plate and the seamounts, then we have a static plume. Is it not so? So your plumes are different. These plumes are different from the static plumes of the Pacific?
No, so the original idea was that the plumes were static and plate was moving on top of it. But now there have been certain evidence that says that plumes are not static. You know, they also move.
So how do you explain the age progression then?
So that would, for the Pacific plate, that would, so the recent study that I showed you, the 2022 paper of Muller, and there they showed that the bend is because of both the movement of the plume as well as the change in the direction of motion of the Pacific plate. So what they claimed in that paper is 50% of the contribution came from the change in the Pacific plate velocity, and 50% of the contribution came from the fact that the plume head was also moving. Okay.
Attreyee, there is a issue here. If you, I am sure that you know this. Baker and Fasciana paper. There's a convection. The Mantle convection drives Indian plate. If it's so, if your model is, if I believe your model and it's correct, if I take this way, then you see the bending is caused by the movement of the plate, not the other way around. Is not it, Attreyee?
The plume, yes.
So
okay,
in that case, that assumption that convection drives plate will be a different thing. I mean, the plume push is a very important factor for plate driving mechanism. Would be a question, as Professor Shah was saying.
Okay,
I may be misunderstood in a way, but anyway.
No, so okay, so it is kind of difficult to prove. So if you look at the at my time-dependent models, okay, we do not see a very clear bending that we see for the instantaneous model. Okay, so if you remember, this was the plume that comes up and then it kind of spreads, and that material cools under the Indian Ocean. Okay, it could be now whether the bending. So for the time-dependent model, we don't even need the bending. Okay, so the plume does not even need to bend in order to form the geoid lobe. But we had proposed this bending just from looking at the recent tomography model, because it looked like there was a hot anomaly that was rising and that was bending towards the Indian plate. But if I talk about my time-dependent models, you actually don't need a bend in order to kind of explain the geoid law. So my models cannot tell you whether indeed the plume has bent or not. It can't. Okay.
Okay.
So it could be that there is a bend, and it's just that we are not modeling it properly. But then at the end of the day, we do not need that bend in order to explain the geoid law.
Now, what I understand, that if a plume comes up from a core mantle boundary, and if it goes up and got stuck to the lithospheric base, it will diverge in both ways, right?
Yes, and that's exactly what we see in the models, in the time-dependent models. And
it's a natural way of doing this. That is, the bending would be like this always. So why not the geoid law is there in other parts?
But sir, the bifurcation would not be symmetrical, I think.
Do you not expect the
bifurcation would not be symmetrical
rather than one way? I mean, that's what Shayandeep is saying as well.
Yes, sir. So the bifurcation would not be symmetrical, sir. I mean, always, if the plate is already moving over a plume, so obviously the bifurcation of the plume beneath the lithosphere would not be symmetrical. It should be asymmetrical in manner.
True. I understand. That is fine.
Yeah.
But why? That's what my earlier query was, whether this plume really is suitable.
On the other hand, you see, I mean, if you think about the LIPs, I mean, they last for only, they are controlled by plumes, large plumes, if I understood correctly the literature, and they last for say only a few million. As you were talking about the plate movement over say 65 million years of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, I think
so
something.
Maybe I mean Attreyee is right. I mean, you probably need to think about plumes of different sorts. I mean, not all plumes are similar. I mean, Attreyee was possibly saying that as well. I mean,
yeah,
that's true. I mean, I think the current consensus is that not all plumes are similar. Some plumes they are fixed, but there are the evidence is that the plume head can
oscillates.
Exactly.
Right.
And that doesn't happen with all the plumes. I mean, there are also different reasons why the oscillation can happen. So it's not uniform, basically.
Thridi, please go ahead. I think you have a query.
Just a minute, if you don't mind. For example, when I don't know whether you have modeled in that way, for in a subducting slab, for example, a plume is coming from this bottom. So what would be the effect of that? Whether it will increase the subduction rate or it will resist? Just out of query.
Well, I mean, what I can think of is if a plume is warming the subducting slab,
then
after some point the pull force, basically it's subducting because of its high density.
Sure.
So if it's warming up the slab, and so then the density
will lower down.
Then probably the pull force will not be strong enough. So I think in a simplistic way, probably the subduction would slow down.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I have a very general query actually. Probably Attreyee can talk later. We have the mantle convection cell, right? So at what scale it varies? I mean, the radius of that mantle convection cell. I mean, we have
$1 million question.
A minimum radius and the maximum radius, or at the average. I mean, I don't have any idea. Just I thought.
So convection cells can also be of various sizes.
Yeah, definitely.
You can think of the convection cell as the size of that of a plate, right? So if you have a plate getting created here and getting destroyed there, subducted there, that would be the downwelling arm of the convection cell, and this would be kind of the upwelling arm of the
Okay. So, here, I have read many places that, so people are, considering that the multi-layer convection cell is right or not.
So there is this, I think there is still this controversy about these.
Yeah, that's what I was, thinking to ask you.
Yeah, the whole mantle versus layered mantle convection.
Exactly.
And well, if you believe our seismic tomography images, which we do, and you see that the slabs reach down up to the core mantle boundary. In some cases, they stall at the upper.
That means single layer convection.
I'm sorry?
That means it's a single layer convection.
Yes, yes. So the fact that the slabs are going down till the core mantle boundary, that would tell you that the convection cell has to reach. You can't have a two-layer convection.
Okay.
But then again, this may not be uniform, because in some places you also see slabs that are stalling at the 660 kilometer boundary. So like plumes, do not behave exactly the same way always. The slabs also do not behave exactly the same way. So there is some sort of a slight layering, and so the slabs has to push through. Because the viscosity of the mantle increases as you go from the upper to the lower mantle, below 660. So the slabs has to push through it in order to sink inside the mantle. So in some places, the slabs are still stalling. Okay?
Right.
So whether it's completely single layer or completely layered, so it definitely is not completely layered. It's not that we have a uniform two-layered convection. It's more likely a single-layered convection, but some places you do have kind of a semi-layered convection.
That is reflected in the seismic topography. Not from your result, by others.
Yes, these are mostly from seismic tomography. But again, with time, these seismic tomography images are becoming better and better, so it's clearer, and we have enough of evidence to show that these slabs go down into the core mantle boundary, and some of them do stall at the 660.
Okay, thank you.
Attreyee, there are two more questions in the chat box.
Okay. Jadavpur Ghosh has asked, I would like to know your opinion regarding how the viscosity that is predicted from your calculations can vary depending on the underlying microphysics. For example, if the rheology has stress dependency or the grain size dependency or both, we are not considering all that. Okay, so we are just considering a simple temperature dependent viscosity. So the viscosity is just a function of the temperature. So wherever you have high temperature, your viscosity goes down, and wherever you have low temperature, which is cold, your viscosity goes up. So yes, you can introduce tons of complications, but my models are not at all complicated. These are simple models, and yes, you can introduce stress dependency and see how things change. But for what we have done so far, we haven't taken into account all these secondary complications. Okay. Yes, there's another question by Dr. Lukram. The overall analysis is nice. The Earth gravity field is signature, the Earth's mass heterogeneous in structures and applied in geodesy and geophysics for different purposes. Why can't use free air gravity data in your study in the oceanic domain, epigravity and 2D? Okay. So free air gravity is can tell you about the more about the shallow features. Okay, so free air gravity is like the geoid anomaly. You also have the free air gravity anomaly, but the extent of the free air anomaly is only limited to only the top few hundred kilometers. But when we are talking about the geoids, these are, and especially we are looking at the long wavelength geoid, and these geoid results from mass heterogeneities inside the Earth's deep mantle. When I say deep, we are talking about below hundreds of kilometers, okay, up to the core mantle boundary. So even the topography of the core mantle boundary affects the geoid that we see on the surface. So the advantage of using the geoid for us, for geodesy, probably free gravity anomaly is very useful. But for those of us who are actually studying the deep interior of the Earth, we need geoid anomalies because it gets affected by heterogeneities which are very deep inside the mantle. While free gravity anomaly will only tell you about heterogeneities which are much closer to the surface.
Yeah. There is another question. Yeah.
Yes. Does the position of the convection cell determines when and where a new plate is going to form? Yes. In fact, as I was saying, the downwelling arm of the convection cell tells you where a plate is getting subducted, it's getting destroyed. And the upwelling arm is basically where you have new plate formation. So it is the arms, these convection cells, that determine where you will have a new plate formation and where the plate will get destroyed. But having said that, this is again a very it's a closed system. It depends. It's a very interdependent system. So it's not that everything. So whatever we see on the surface depends on what's going in the inside of the Earth. But at the same time, what's going on inside the Earth is getting affected by what we have on the surface. The fact that the plates are sinking, it's, for example, as I was saying, that you have these plumes rising from the LLSVP, and that is because of the thermal instabilities created due to the sinking of the surface plates. So again, this is in earth sciences, this is a chicken and egg problem, right? What drives what? So, so basically both are driving each other. So you have the Earth's interior driving the surface, and also the surface is definitely affecting what's going on inside the Earth.
Thank you, Attreyee.
So, sir, just to continue that question.
Man, please go ahead.
Is it possible to predict whether, like the Indian plate, when is it going to split into another plate, something like that, or a Eurasian plate is going to split into 2 new plates?
Okay, so just to repeat your question, whether it's possible to predict when the Indian plate is going to split.
Yeah. Like initially we had a whole big single plate earlier, but it eventually started splitting into multiples. Similarly, in future, is it possible that our Indian plate or the Eurasian plate is going to split?
So you're talking about the Indo-Australian plate boundary?
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about the plate boundary. I'm talking about the whole plate. Is it possible? Yeah.
Well, so again, people have done these plate reconstructions as people have done for the past. People have also done future plate reconstructions. Okay, so you also have plate reconstructions 250 million years into the future. But then again, these are all speculative. So and these are also not unique, right? Because right now, for example, the Atlantic is opening and the Pacific is closing. So one sort of plate reconstruction tells you that the continents you have on both sides of the Pacific, so the Americas and Asia, will join together and form a supercontinent. So the Pacific will close, and you have the Atlantic, which will be kind of the largest ocean. But then you also have different scenarios. It may so happen that the Pacific all of a sudden stop closing, okay, or all of a sudden the Atlantic stop, expanding. So those kinds of things is very difficult to predict. Okay, so we can kind of give you like several possible scenarios, but it's very difficult to say that this is what's going to happen. Okay, does that answer your question?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Attreyee, there is one last question in the chat box.
Yeah. Is there any global example where the mantle convection cell is opposing the motion of a particular plate? There is. So if you look at North America, okay, so underneath North America, the mantle is moving eastwards because you have that old, remember when I was showing you the slide where the Pacific plate was forming and it was surrounded by these three plates, the Phoenix, the Izanagi, and the Farallon. So the Farallon plate had moved to the east and had subducted underneath the North American continent. So the mantle, if you look at the flow of the mantle underneath North America, it's moving eastward. But if you look at velocity of North American plate, it's actually moving towards the west. So there are scenarios where the direction of convection and direction of plate motion does not match. Now, why that could happen? So again, I have, in my PhD and postdoc, I have done a lot of work on this. And one of the things we think is that's why I said that it's not just the interior, the surface is also important. So the mantle convection is a very important driving force. But on top of that, you also have something called the GPE, we call it the gravitational potential energy. The fact that you have a mountain and it's going to come from a high potential energy to a low potential energy level, the mountain tries to spread out. Okay. And that also constitutes a significant driving force for the plates. So in case of North America, what we think is that the main driving force is the GPE, and that is pushing the North American plate to the west, while the convection is trying to push the plates to the east. Okay. So yes, so that's why I said it's kind of a interdependent process. So the surface is dependent on the interior, and the interior is also kind of dependent on the surface.
Thank you, Attreyee. So before closing, actually, I have a few queries on my own. The first one is that in your model about the Indian Ocean geoid law, there you have assumed, obviously all models comes with some assumptions, that before 140 million years, mantle was uniform. So how far it is wise to say that mantle was uniform throughout the Earth history just before 140, and it became heterogeneous, or it became means it started interacting with these slabs just after 140? Means what it is the reason for setting this time limit of 140 or 150?
Okay. So the mantle was definitely not homogeneous before 140, right? So the mantle, there is definitely stuff inside the mantle. Right. So this is so we start our model from 140 million years. There is a very practical reason for that, because these models are run in supercomputers and then takes a long time to run. So yes, you can run models for 500 million years, but that will probably take months to run. And it's very, very difficult to get time to run your models in supercomputing, time and money to run your models on these supercomputing systems, okay? But of course, does it affect the results? So we have, run our models back from, say, instead of 140 to, say, 200 million, from 200 million years till the present day. And what we see is, and not just us, some others also have who have done these kinds of time-dependent modeling. And unless and until, so whether you start from 200 or 140, the results are not affected. So that is why, to just save on computational time, we have, kind of started all the models at 140. So it's not like a magic number. It's basically, depending on what we think is realistic. We can't also start too recent, we can't start at 40 million years. We need to have, specific, at least some time, that amount of time to go back to. But again, if you go back too far in time, I mean, we have information from, say, 400 million years, okay? But the thing is, that's going to make the model run much, much longer and much more costly. But what we have seen is that even from 200 or 250 million years runs do not change the results much. So that is why it's not that before 140 million years mantle was homogeneous. But even if we start the system from that time, we get pretty realistic results.
But the primary
So-
assumption is that we are taking it as an means uniform.
In
Okay,
addition to
that's
that, Attreyee, in
Yeah.
addition to that, if you, I think you have done that. Did you have you run model with some heterogeneity at around 140 million years or so? At the initial model, if you put some
If
heterogeneity.
we start our model at 200 million years, by 140 million years, they will always, the mantle will going to be heterogeneous.
Okay.
Right? And that's what I'm saying. So the results do not change.
Okay.
It's
Nice.
a very slight difference.
But yeah.
So yes, the assumption is there, but then it does not affect the results. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That is why I thought that it's okay to start all the models at once.
Okay. And after the last query, it is not a question actually. I think you were referring to the large low shear wave velocity zones. So these two zones of means people now call them Tujo and Jason, and they are popularly, I think, known as Tujo and Jason. So the circumference of these zones, if I plot it on the surface of the Earth, it is not uniform. It is not a circular.
Yes.
It's very means irregular pattern.
Yes.
So the thing is that some of the spots or the mantle plume positions are falling on them and some are not falling on them. So specifically the reunion hotspot, is it exactly falling means inside the zone or at the periphery or simply outside the zone?
I am not 100% sure, but I think reunion falls on the periphery. I may be wrong. I need to check that.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to check that. But I think it's along the periphery.
Okay, and for this models of this plate movements, you have, I think, considered this means
No net
rotation. Yeah, no net rotation of the individual plates.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, another assumption.
You have to have.
Well, the assumption is basically no net rotation is all it's saying is that the mantle is fixed. The motion of the plate with respect to the mantles, right?
Okay.
So that's what the NNR basically
Right.
tells you. Yeah.
Okay. No, actually, I was worried about the path of the Indian plate, starting from its position near the reunion to the present day position.
Okay. Now, this plate reconstructions is basically a reconstruction done on the assumption that the mantle is fixed and the plate is moving.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think. One last question I would request you to answer just in continue with the previous question. When the convection is opposing the plate motion, is it now somehow affecting the Wilson cycle?
When the convection is opposing is it now somehow affecting the Wilson cycle?
I think it's required much more analysis and time.
It's kind of difficult to say, because these are all we can see is the present day plate motion, right? And the direction of the mantle is opposite. Now, whether is that going to continue for millions of years, or whether it's it's going to change in a few thousands of years time, all these things we don't know. So it's kind of difficult to predict whether the Wilson cycle is going to be affected by this phenomenon.
To add this,
It's a
to add this, if Wilson cycle has to follow, then you'll have to close Atlantic first before Pacific.
Yeah, no. So some of the reconstructions show that at some point there will be subduction zones all around the Atlantic, and the Atlantic will start to close.
Yeah.
That is also another scenario.
Yeah. There are 4 models like this. Right?
Yeah. No, exactly.
I think it is a long time. If any,
the question answer session was longer than the talk, I think.
No, I
If
think
any-
I took a bit longer time also. I think my talk was not within 30 minutes.
If you have any more queries, please come with that, or else we are going to close it soon. I don't think so.
No, I think so.
By the way, just a query. You model erosion of the Indian lithosphere with reunion plume, right?
Yes.
So why did you choose this reunion, not the other one that was older than that?
Because that's because this is the most recent, and this was also sitting just underneath the Indian lithosphere when it erupted. So at 65 MA, it sat just underneath the Indian plate. But in fact, the student with whom I had that paper, Jyotirmoy, he's actually has a project where he's looking at the interaction of other plumes with the Indian plates.
I think if erosion had to occur, then the other plume that erupted before that might have some effect on this, right?
Could be, yeah. So he's looking into that. So whether the other plumes, could have.
Just a query.
Yes.
Okay, Shandip, I think we must
Yes,
give her a big round of applause.
Yes, sir.
I like everyone to give big round of applause to Dr. Ghosh. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
And Dr.